This video shows how I put together this little bitty green backpack. I like these mini backpacks and they're great gifts. I made this one for my wife for Christmas in 2020, and I'm going to give you a not quite step-by-step walk through the process of putting it together. I had to cut a lot of things just to get this into a typical YouTube video length, so if some things you don't understand, write a comment, let me know, I'll try to explain them. You can see Merry Xmas 2020 there written inside. So it all started out with the big old hide, and I had a pattern. I'll put a card in for the video I made before. I actually made the pattern for this mini backpack. This is the second one I've made. You can see I cut out the pattern so that there's actually a brand hidden inside of the backpack behind the outer pocket. So thought it felt pretty clever finding a way to hide that brand in inside the bag, so it's not obvious but still there. Put together the zippers from zipper tape and then added pulls on them. I always want to burn the ends to make sure that they don't fray, but I was a little bit lazy here and didn't actually cut teeth off or put the little ends on. The brass ends you can put in to hold the zippers together. I just buried the ends in the bag as I built it, and that seems to work well enough to keep the zipper together. So here I'm using some basting tape to hold the zipper onto the leather pieces, and then I marked the stitching line with the spur. Did all this bag with hand stitching. This is the last major project I did with all hand stitching before I got my leather sewing machine, so I'll be doing some videos later on with the sewing machine. Speeds this process up by a lot. I'd probably make a bag like this in one evening instead of taking a week or two. So one of the things I'm going to do in this video is, for time, I'm going to skip showing putting the contact cement down for most of the steps. You just have to trust that I'm actually contact cementing. But what you can see there is I've glued down the gusset around the zipper so that it has a folded edge. Don't have the flat edge by the zipper, and I didn't sew back over top of it again because I'm doing this all hand sewing. That would have taken a lot, but I put 2 zipper pulls in on each of the zippers just so you can get in from either side, or if you have something big you can put it in the middle and have it stick out and zip around it. I'm showing here that I'm stitching the end of the zipper part of the gusset into the flat part of the gusset. I've done this a total of 4 times on the whole bag, but I only show it this one time. So here I've got the outer face of the pocket, and for this bag I actually used a Welt, so it's a little bit different design. It would be too thick to stitch it on the machine I've got anyway, but it looks pretty good when it's all done. And you can see here I'm doing a little bit of work to clean up the end of the welt where it has to splice together. You want to skive it down a little bit so it's not too bulky in that spot. But the welt adds a nice little detail to the bag, and I think it does help a little bit with the structure, make it a little bit stronger on those seams. But like I said, it makes it thick enough that it would be difficult to stitch it with the machine I've got. So I don't think if I put a bag like this together on this machine I'm going to be able to welt it. Yep, and you're getting a little bit of the Xmas message. I didn't like the way that silver pen looked, so I went back over it with a paint pen. Make it a little bit more visible and a little bit more permanent. I like to throw messages on the inside of the bag in places it's hard to see and where you can only write it if you do it while the bag's being constructed. I think that's a nice detail that shows people that it was handmade, and I was thinking ahead. I also don't show most of the roughing, so whenever you're doing contact cement on the skin side of leather you have to rough it, otherwise it won't really stick. So trust that I've done that for all these different seams, but I'm not showing it. Here I'm stitching the front pocket panel to the gusset all the way around, and then when I get to the place where the 2 gusset pieces meet, I have to put a little side poke through to get the thread underneath. I think that's a pretty neat detail. I can't do that with the machine, but you can do it when you're hand stitching. You get all the way around and get it done, and then you can turn that front pocket right side out, and it's ready to get stitched onto the main body of the bag. But first I have to glue on the welt. So I'm putting a little welt detail here too to make it match with the rest of the bag. So just have a little partial welt that goes on that spot. I tap it down, and then like I said, I haven't shown the gluing, but I put the glue down. I have to let it sit for about 20 minutes to dry, and then you come back and you can put the pieces together. It sticks well enough. You can use it for small things like keychains and watch bands. You can just glue them and they'll stay forever, but with something this big you really need to stitch it too. So to stitch that pocket onto the front of the bag, I actually have to go in through the pocket like this. It looks kind of silly, but it works. I think I could do it with the machine too. I haven't tried it yet. And now I'm gluing the remainder of the pocket down so it lines up with that front of the bag, and that'll all get turned inside later so you won't see it. It'll be hidden in the buried in the seam. Now I'm doing the zipper for the gusset on the main body of the bag. Again, I'm putting the tape down. I like to put the tape on both sides before I pull the zipper apart so that I'll know which sides of the zipper go together, and I won't accidentally stitch the zipper together with the two pieces misaligned so that then it won't go back together properly. I'm putting the stitching marks on there, and then I have to go through and actually stitch all the way down. It took me a couple hours probably to stitch both of these zippers on. With the machine, it just takes like a minute. I do like the hand stitching. It's actually pretty good kind of moving meditation. I get to spend a lot of time just inside my head being relaxed. I think it looks pretty cool too to watch it, but it takes a long time. So here I am getting the pockets cut out. When I made this pattern, I didn't actually include the seam allowance on any of the pieces that I produced, so I have to remember to get the dividers out and mark the seam allowance on the leather as I cut it. I didn't do that quite right on the blue backpack I did in the earlier video, so the pockets didn't have as much space in them. On those side pockets I did it better this time. And then there's a few places where I can't hide the stitching. One of them is on the pockets here, so I folded over the top edge and glued it down, and then I'm going to stitch across, and I actually got some nicer looking hand stitching thread for the visible stitching on the pockets and on the straps. This is actually a braided thread, so the thread I usually use is just twisted, but that's actually a braided thread. Now here I'm gluing the pockets onto the body, and because you'll be able to see part of where that glue might go, I put some blue tape down just to keep the glue from getting too far away from me and exposed on the body of the bag. Kind of stitch those pockets on to the gusset, which is one big loop at this point. It's a little bit hard to handle, lots of floppy leather pieces, but just kind of keeping track of it and getting the pieces together in the right place works okay. So now the pockets are on. They're going to get stitched in when the bag comes together, so everything will get pulled into that inside seam, and you can see that with the gusset it starts to be quite the thick seam to stitch. So here I am starting, and I like to start at the top just so I know where I'm going to get all the way around. I skipped the rest of the stitching. I'm not going to show it. So here I am gluing up the straps. So to get the straps to look the way that I wanted to, what I figured out was I could take a couple of pieces of this leather, nice oil tan green leather, and I could actually make it about twice as wide as I needed it to, and then glue it so that I could fold it in on itself so that the leather ended up with a seam on the back side right down the middle. And I could have left it at that. That would have been actually perfectly fine if I'd stitched all the way around to hold it in and left it that way, but I decided, I decided that I wanted to line the straps that were going to go over the shoulders with some veg tan leather just to give it a little bit more padding, and also to make sure that there wouldn't be any transfer. Sometimes with these dyed leathers there can be some transfer, especially when you get sweaty or if you get rained on. So I put that natural veg tan leather in as a liner to give a little bit of separation, try to keep there from being any issues with that. And it'll all be waterproofed too, but there you see me turning the corner at the end of the strap. Now this is cool. When I'm doing the buckle end, I put a stitch through right by the buckle, and then I thread the string through underneath that loop and put a couple of stitches in through the loop to help hold it in place. And then you can see that there's more stitches going through the folded back part at the end, and then on down to the other end of that billet. So now I'm gluing in the shoulder straps and the billets where they buckle on. to the back panel of the bag before I put it all together. Then I'm going to get the welt on. Again, it's just a piece of this same leather that I folded over onto itself to add some thickness and give that round welt presentation. And here you can see again I'm cleaning up the end where it overlaps itself. There's a chance for it to be super thick there, so you have to kind of skive both ends down so they fit together and don't add up too much bulk. And then, yeah, just put some contact cement into that spot and clamp it and let it glue in place rather than letting it glue open and then pushing it down. Contact cement will work that way, it just takes longer to get set. So again, I skipped showing you putting the contact cement on. Here I'm gluing the back panel in to the front part of the main bag that I stitched earlier. And I mentioned this in some of the other videos, but the contact cement really sets up better if you can put a lot of force on it, either with a roller or by hitting it with a hammer. So that's why you'll always see people hitting the contact cement joints with hammers after they get them put together. That makes them really stick. And we want to stitch all the way around here again. I'm only going to show the first stitch and then just going to skip. You kind of know what it looks like. It takes a while. For me to stitch all the way around, it takes about an hour and 20 minutes. And I went through, and all the loose ends that I had, I cleaned up with lighter, just melted them down and got it flush. There's the moment of truth, turning the bag right side out, a little bit like an octopus being born or something with all the straps. Here it comes. And you know, it's one of those things, like a lot of projects, you're worried that they're not going to be good, and then there's this moment where they just come together and you're like, wow, that actually came out pretty nice. So the leather I used is oil tanned, and it's pretty tough, but it wasn't really waterproof. It would absorb water, and I didn't want it to. I wanted the water to run off, so I used some Aussie dressing here to make it waterproof and give it a little bit of conditioning too. Now that darkened it a lot, but I kind of like the way it came out. I checked it on a scrap piece before I did it, so I knew it was going to make this big color difference. But I like the darker color as it came out better than the lighter color it was to begin with. You rub it on, and then you have to just rub it back off because it gets the excess. You rub it down into the leather, and it makes it waterproof. So there you go. One little green backpack. I think it came out pretty good. This is my second one. I've learned a lot on the first one, and I implemented on this one, and the next one will be even better. Sometime this summer I'll make one with the machine, see how fast it can do it. Oh yeah, you end up with Aussies in the holes for the buckles, so you have to go through and pop it all out and clean it off to make it nice. Well, if you enjoyed this video, give me a like, maybe a subscribe. I got more stuff like this coming up. If you had any ideas about how I could do it differently, give me a comment. I appreciate that. Or if you just liked it, you want to tell me what part you liked the best, give me a comment too. Tell me what color leather you would use to make a mini backpack, and maybe I'll put one together. Thanks. I appreciate it. Bye.